Good afternoon. Oops. Good afternoon, Rotarians. Nope. There we go. Now it's ready. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. I'd like to thank the Huntington Center for hosting us today for a Rotary on the Road. Now would be a great time to check into your social media, and once you've completed that, please make sure that your ringers are turned down. And if you want to keep your phones out and take some photos or video of Will as he's telling us all about his story and the good things he is doing, that'd be great, and you could share them then. I'd like to ask Kevin Mullen to come to the podium to deliver reflection and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I first have to acknowledge the last time I wore this sweater in the same room as Mark Arudia, he posted a photo online and it turned into a bunch of Star Trek memes. So live long and prosper, I think. All right, I told Dominic I'm going to wander. So let's just start. I want to play Simon Says. All right, so Simon Says, make a circle with your hand. Simon Says, hold it up as high as you can. Simon Says, put it down low. Simon Says, put it on your chin. So I want you to think about where you just put that. I believe what I said was put it on your chin. Simon Says, game over. So what do we learn about that game? First of all, to those of you that actually put it on your chin, kudos. You're better at instructions than I am. What we find is that people follow our actions, not our words. They do what we do. Does anybody remember the old anti-drug ads from the 80s? There's a few of them that like stick in my brain, but there's one where a dad is rifling through his kid's stuff and he finds a box that has the kid's stash in it. And he's confronting his son saying, is this yours? Is this yours? And ultimately in frustration he says, who taught you how to do this? And his son says, I learned it from you, Dad. We learn from actions, not words. I know Dad said just say no. I know Dad said don't do this. But he learned from his father's actions. Let's think about this in our daily lives and in our own actions each day. Let's reflect today on what you're doing and who's following your actions in our community. Think about, is that really the path that you want to pave for your followers? And let's also reflect on Toledo Rotary. Our motto is service above self, placing the interests of others ahead of, not alongside, ahead of our own interests. How are we putting those words into action? Growing up in Catholic schools, I remember teachers saying, if you were put on trial for being Catholic, would you be convicted? Is there enough evidence in your life that you're Catholic that you'd be convicted? And that's a really powerful question. So I asked the question, if you were put on trial for being a Rotarian, for living a life of service above self, is there enough evidence that you'd be convicted? And with that, we turn to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for that insightful reflection and thought-provoking. Thank you to Donna Bogan and Hartman Bogan for being the meeting sponsor this month. Does anyone have any guests with them? And if so, could you please direct them to the floor mic and introduce them?
Hello, hello. Is this on? Yes, President Cindy, I have with me an assistant vice president and branch manager for Genoa Bank, who is, more importantly, the treasurer for our new Rotaract Club. And he has a challenge for each of us to recommend a potential person for Rotaract who's a young professional. So let's make him feel welcome by giving him a referral.
President Cindy, I have my partner and Focus CFO, Jeff Williams, with me today.
President Cindy, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Carrie, who is the Director of Marketing at SSOE.
Welcome, Carrie.
Hello, today I've got Edna Long with Proforma Specialty Printing, and I also have my daughter, Adeline Reddish, representative from Ottawa Hills Elementary.
Good afternoon, everybody. One of my guests was running a little behind, got tired of the meeting. I have the pleasure of introducing and having as a guest today Ms. Leste with Mount Library and Ms. Liz Watson with Big Brother Big Sisters, Northwest Ohio. Thank you.
Welcome. It's nice to have all of you here with us today. Do we have any visiting Rotarians in the room? Okay. Recently, Janina Douglas provided us with an update on the generous donation that was made to Ukraine from mostly Rotarians of the Toledo Club, but some from the district. And the school in Warsaw was nice enough to share a thank you video with us. So I'm just going to ask Dom if we can play that briefly.
Lipova 35 is the place where Ukrainians who fled from the war come to get aid. This is the hub where ASW students, parents, and teachers come to help. Humanitarian aid for ASW for Ukraine comes from many different parts of the world: the USA, Portugal, Spain, Israel, the UK, Taiwan, Japan, and many more. Goods are sorted, packed, and loaded into trucks and vans, which then travel to Ukraine to feed people who suffer from this senseless war.
3 тижні ми просиділи у підвалі з чоловіком, а тепер ми в почті. Дуже дякуємо всім, хто нам допомагає, бо без цього б ми не вижили. Не тут, не там. І хотілося б, щоб ця допомога не закінчувалась, бо людям важко без неї.
Поляки гарно дбають на українців. Честь їм і хвала. Ну, это братья наши по крови. Слава Польше. У нас там воюют, там молоді українці. Ми на них надіємося. Поки будуть стріляти, нам там робити нічого.
Since February 22, the ASW for Ukraine Center have filled 6 trucks of food, clothing, medication, shoes, toys, and hygienic items. The ASW for Ukraine Center provides basic help for those in need. Every week from Tuesday to Saturday, the center becomes a beehive of activity where volunteers, young and old, work hard to meet the needs of the Ukrainian people. This is the community of the American School of Warsaw, a truly international community of people from many nations who come together with open hearts, wanting to help in any way they can.
Очень благодарна всем, кто оказывает помощь. Очень много выехало, но остались еще.
Дуже вдячні за цю допомогу, тому що вона дуже нам необхідна. Так як ми приїхали, ні роботи, ні житла, нам все допомогли. І поселитися, і з харчуванням. Кожен тиждень нас підтримують цими пакунками, які зараз видають харчовими. Дуже вдячні, дай Боже їм здоров'я, щоб швидше закінчилась війна і ми могли повернутися додому. Все добре. Відчуваємо цю підтримку конкретно. І ми, і наші сім'ї.
From the beginning of the war, many ASW families invited Ukrainian families to their homes. They provided home and meals. ASW for Ukraine Center is not only a food distribution center, this is the place where volunteers help refugees to adapt to the new environment. They receive medical advice and psychological support. To support Ukraine, students from the school organize walkathons, perform concerts, and play for the children from Ukrainian orphanages, organize art and cooking classes so that refugees forget about their current situation, and reduce stress levels. ASW for Ukraine Center is a place where everyone can contribute. Our youngest volunteer is 6 years old, and we are very proud of everyone involved here. At the ASW for Ukraine Center, Ukrainian children receive school supplies, used laptops included. This is absolutely critical because it allows them to continue education in Ukraine online.
So we have another day in Lipova Center. This is Saturday. We have about 300 people waiting outside. They came to get food and they came to get some clothing. And also we're giving out laptops. We're giving out laptops to people with children so they can continue their education in Ukraine or they can learn here in Poland. So we're serving tea and coffee and we hope to make people's lives a little better today.
Most arrived in Poland with marginally working cell phones to use for connecting with their schools. A mother who wanted to stay anonymous said, "My child is disabled and I'm very grateful for the laptop. He can finally use a computer and not his broken phone." Regardless the circumstances, children want to continue their education. For them and their parents, it is crucial to keep the connection with Ukraine, where they dream to return after the war is over.
Ми з дитиною з окупованої частини України, з нашої Херсонської області. Ми дуже вдячні за підтримку, за допомогу. Хочеться зберегти українську освіту для своїх дітей. Їм потрібно вчитися, здобувати знання.
We hope that we continue to receive donations so that we can continue helping those in need. It is very cold here in Warsaw now, and many people need help, now more than ever.
I'd like to give a shout out to Janina, who was very diligent in trying to raise these funds that were sent over there. And she has many more plans ahead. So stay tuned where there might be opportunities for participation, not only financially, but as a service project. This past week, during International Rotaract Week, the Toledo Area Rotaract Club signed its charter and had their first informational meeting. They were joined by District Governor Diana Savage, who signed the charter. Many thanks to our own Mark Uridia, Max Reddish, and Gary Johnson, and many others who have helped this new group get off the ground. Their support has been invaluable to these young professionals, and we look forward to partnering with the new Rotaracts in the future. Can I have a little clap for them? And at this time, I'd like to ask Sarah Hunton, who will introduce today's guest speaker, Will Lucas.
Dom, going forward, I'll expect everyone coming up to the podium to have a walk-up song because it is too quiet coming up here, okay? It is very awkward. So, happy Monday, everyone. I'm so happy you're all here. Thank you for being here. I am very excited to welcome Will Lucas. He's an entrepreneur and content creator who grew up right here in Toledo, and he is back doing so many wonderful things. I was going to go through his whole bio, but then I was like, I hate when people do that. So why am I going to do that? I'm going to let him talk up himself. But if you guys don't know, I will just say a few things that he has done. He is the founder and CEO at Creditio Marketing, Technology, and Production Agency. Him and his wife also founded Toll House, which if you remember, we had a happy hour there a couple months ago. And then he is also serving as a brand manager for 2 different companies, as well as, which I think is really cool, he is very committed to bringing Toledo back to what it should be. And he's actually purchased 3 buildings down here along the waterfront that he is developing for our town and for our city. And lastly, one of the coolest things I think is that he also is a songwriter on the side. Like, how crazy. He does all this business stuff, all this marketing stuff, and then he's got this. And he actually helped write a song for an album that sold over 500,000 copies. So it's quite a life you live, Will, and we're very excited to hear about it and hear about all you're doing. So without further ado, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you guys today. All right, that should be good. I'm Will Lucas. Hi, I'm Will. It's good to see so many people. Some of you I know, some of you I've had the pleasure to meet outside, and some of you I hope to get to know. So a little bit about me, founder and CEO at William Lucas Company, which is home to Creatio, Toll House, and Milk, which I'll introduce some of you guys to in a little bit. I'm the brand manager at Afrotech, which is the largest black tech digital platform and conference in the world. Our annual conference, the November edition of that conference, hosts more than 20,000 black technologists. We moved it to Austin last year. Previously, it was held annually in Silicon Valley. But more than 20,000, black engineers, scientists, venture capitalists, angel investors come to this conference. As she mentioned, real estate. So we have 3 buildings where one of them is already open, which is Toll House. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Founded and curate TEDx Toledo, which we've been doing since I think 2012. A little bit more about me, but you can read all that in probably the bio they sent out or something. But I was privileged to have this past year been nominated for an NAACP Image Award. Lost to Trevor Noah, but if you're gonna lose to anybody, it can be Trevor. It can be Trevor Noah. So what I want to talk about today is the levers of big futures, and what I mean by that will become more apparent as I get through this talk. And so, if you look at Wallet Hub and you search the cities that are the best to start a business in, no matter what your demographic or background, it's not categorized by demographics. Toledo ranks 89th on this list. And now, obviously, you don't know how many people are on the list, but just suffice it to say, we should be a lot higher. You want to talk about the most innovative cities in the United States. Toledo ranks number 82 on this list. And this is super important to me because I have the privilege to sit on the Innovate Ohio, which is by our Lieutenant Governor. So our job is to make Ohio more innovative and entrepreneurial friendly. I'm also the Vice Chair of the University of Toledo Board of Trustees. And I sit on the Casino Control Commission for the state of Ohio. We regulate casinos, sports gaming, and all that fun stuff. But this is super important to me because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a technologist. And more than I'm a technologist, I'm an entrepreneur. I knew my entire life I was going to work for myself. And when I had a day job, I could have had a nervous breakdown because that life wasn't for me. But I wanted to create opportunities and build a future of an idea that I had. I thought that life was going to be in the music business. And so when I was 18 years old, actually a week before my 18th-year-old birthday, I met a local program director at a radio station. And I met him at a teen summit. I said, "Hey, I'm Will Lucas. I want to be in the music business." And he said, the best thing I can tell you to do is find an internship somewhere. And there was a line of, other teenagers waiting to meet this radio guy. And so he said, "Just come out to the radio station tomorrow and we'll talk a little bit more about it. I can spend a little bit more time with you." So I go out to the radio station that next day and, he gives me these catalogs of musical instruments, a whole bunch of stuff I didn't have the money to afford. But I thought it was cute. So he said, "Best thing I can tell you again is to find an internship somewhere. Matter of fact, we need an intern here." So my internship started that day on the Juice 107.3. And 3 days after that internship, he put me on the air with him during the 5 o'clock traffic jam. And I was on the air with him every day after that. 6 months after that, they gave me my own Saturday night radio show. And I was 18 years old and had the #1 radio show in Toledo on weekends. But again, I didn't get into this to be in radio. I wanted to be in the music business. And so about 2 years after doing that, I moved down to Atlanta. And I lived in Atlanta for about 2 years. And during that trip, I went to go live with a friend of mine who's from Toledo and was working in studios at the time. He was an engineer mostly, but he also produced records. And he was working as an engineer at a studio called Doppler Studios, which is right in the middle of Atlanta. All the big artists in the world, no matter what type of music they have recorded out of Doppler. And 2 weeks after I moved to Atlanta, he took me to the studio with him. And just to give you paint a picture in your mind, so we're sitting in Doppler Studios. There's another studio behind this physical location. There are 2 studios right next door to each other, in front and the back. Whitney Houston is recording in the studio behind us. And the studio we're in at this particular day was called Stankonia, which is owned by the rap group Outkast, which some of you guys might know. And so we're in Stankonia, which is historically Bobby Brown's studio, which was called Boss Town. And so obviously Bobby and Whitney were married. So Bobby comes up to his old studio because he's trying to revive his career, and I'm 2 weeks into Atlanta. And so he comes up and my friend plays him some instrumentals, and there's no lyrics to the songs, just some instrumentals. And so I go to the corner of the room and start writing to one of the songs, and Bobby walks over to me. So some of you guys who may not know Bobby Brown, you know, New Edition, My Prerogative, Tenderoni. Some of you guys are still like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Pepperoni. And so anyway, but for those in the room, you can follow along, and hopefully the other guys will appreciate it. I don't know what's happening on the screen there, it's jumping back and forth. But so Bobby comes up to the studio, my friend's playing him some records, I go to the corner of the room and start writing to the song. And he walks up to me, Bobby Brown does, and he says, "What did you write?" And so I sang to him what I wrote. So he took the paper from me and walked in the booth and sang the song that I just wrote. And I've been here for 2 weeks. And I'm like, mind blown, like, I'm like, anything is possible, you know? And I'm a guy from Toledo, and I'm writing a song, and Bobby Brown is singing it. I still have the album at home. It never came out, but that moment showed me if with ambition and putting yourself in a position to be successful, anything is possible. And I've had more of these experiences in my life, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get through this talk. But what's super important to me, as I've talked about, you know, the seats I've been privileged to sit in, is it was always with intention that I knew I wanted something so bad I was willing to put myself at risk and sacrifice, you know, comforts of life. What I didn't mention about that 2 years of living in Atlanta is 8 months out of those 2 years, I lived on the MARTA, the train station. I lived in that train station and in Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And what's important about that is I don't call myself homeless at that time because I could have always come back to Toledo, but I wanted it so bad. I would risk, you know, not having a roof over my head for, you know, every once in a while somebody would let me come over and take a shower. But for 8 months out of that 2-year period, I lived at the train station. And so I was in the studio by day, and at the time, I'm not sure what the schedules are like now, but at the time, if you got to the train station, any of the train stations by 2 a.m., you could get to the airport. But if you got there after 2 a.m., the train stopped running, and it wouldn't start rerunning again until 6 a.m. So if I made it to this train station, I could get down to Hartsfield-Jackson, and I wouldn't look out of place because everybody's sleeping in the airport, in Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And so, but if I, you know, obviously found myself after 2 a.m. getting to the train station, I would stay in the train station and wait till the train started running again in the morning, and just ride it back from Alpharetta all the way down to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, back and forth, till I found something to do during the day. And so I say what I'm going to be talking about today with great conviction because I put myself on the line. I've taken great risk to build some of the things we've been privileged to be able to build and to sit in some of the seats I've been privileged to sit in. So I can't go further in this talk without talking about what my point of this whole thing is about. And I was having a conversation about the future of Toledo with some folks, and I always had this idea that the vision for a city had to come from the top. And it didn't strike me until I had a conversation with some friends of mine. It's like anybody can come up with a vision for a city. Anybody can come up with a vision for a particular vertical in the city. Maybe you're not the mayor, maybe you're not a governor, but anybody can have a vision for the future of a community and put in the work to make those things happen. And so I have a vision for the city of Toledo, and it's to make it the most entrepreneur-friendly community in the United States. And why is this a vision that I'm passionate about? It's because other people have figured out what our value is, and we haven't figured it out yet. And so when I talk about other people have figured it out, well, Taco Bell figured it out. And so what's interesting about this is people look at me sideways when I tell them Taco Bell figured out what's important and what's valuable about Toledo, and we haven't figured it out. Well, if you know anything about Taco Bell and how fast food places, retail shops, and product designers or product makers test products, they put them in test markets. And what Taco Bell realized about Toledo is, I'll read this quote from you. It's from the president of Toledo-based Great Lakes Marketing Research Group. It says, "Toledo is a very typical city." And when you stop right there, some people automatically get offended because, we're special. Everybody thinks they're special, but you got to figure out what's special about you. And our specialness is we are very typical. So we are very representational of what's happening in typical cities across the United States. Our employment levels, education levels, and other important demographical variables are near what will be found in other cities. And why is that interesting? It's because if you can find something that will work in a typical city, it will likely work in other typical cities. And most cities are relatively typical. There's only so many Chicagos, only so many New Yorks, only so many Los Angeleses. Most cities are very basic. Most of them are. They have unique things about them, but most cities are not those outliers. Toledo is. And there's certain things about Toledo, which we just talked about, our educational levels, our employment levels, our income levels, that are representational of what might work. If it'll work here, it can work anywhere. And I've said this often, there's this common thing that we hear about, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Well, maybe, but if you can make it in Toledo, you can make it anywhere. And because in Toledo, you have to create opportunities for yourself. And it's a lot easier to do that than some of us give the city credit for. There's not many places you can go and be sitting in a room and the school superintendent is sitting in the room and you can go over and talk and they will actually listen to you. There's not so many cities you can call government center and a commissioner will pick up the phone, which happened to me. I called the Lucas County Commissioner's office several years ago. Ben Conop was a commissioner, expecting that an assistant will pick up the phone, and he picked up the phone. There's not so many places you can go and run into a CEO and they will actually give you 2 or 3 minutes. Imagine trying to do that in Los Angeles. Imagine trying to do that in Chicago. Imagine trying to walk up to a very high profile individual and get their attention. In Toledo, you are 1 degree separated from anybody you want to meet. And they will give you at least a couple of minutes of time, and you better knock it out of the park. But even if you do, if you fall flat on your face, it's one conversation, and there's so many more places where you can go and get your opportunity to be able to find your success. So we're the perfect place to try new things, fail, learn, and try again. If you fail in Toledo, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. We're a very forgiving town. We love to cheer people on, which is fantastic. But just keep trying. This is a place where I've failed and failed and failed and failed. I failed publicly. You know, I've had startups that were on the cover of local papers. Nobody asks about them anymore because I stopped talking about them. But if you ask me, there's plenty of things I tried that did not work publicly. But it's okay. I learned something at every turn. So let's talk about those things. So how do we become the most entrepreneurial friendly in the United States, entrepreneurial friendly city? Place a high value on entrepreneurship. Super basic. We don't do that today. We don't place a high value on starting something today. And I have a personal philosophy, something I came up with. I was born and raised here, so I came up with this reason why I believe that that's true. And so, historically, Toledo is known for being a place of innovators. Our glass, you talk about that. You talk about the museum, which was funded by entrepreneurs and innovators. You talk about all the institutions that were founded by people who took great risk and were, great capitalists or great, business people of enterprise. So why is that not true anymore? And so my personal philosophy, and I'm happy to have this conversation with anybody who knows different, is it's very difficult to get people to want to take risks when you can have a great job historically, you make 20, 30, sometimes $40 an hour, and not even have a college degree. Toledo, historically, you could. You could not graduate from high school 30 years ago, maybe not so much anymore, but 30 years ago, you could not graduate, get a job on a line somewhere, and make really great money. So why would I go start something when it's so easy to have a very good income and security? Today, it's a lot different. It's more competitive. You're competing on a global landscape. And again, there's nothing to be ashamed of those jobs. I'm only talking about why we take less risks entrepreneurially. So there's other factors there to be considered, obviously. But if we place a higher value on entrepreneurship, more people would consider starting something. Second, elevate homegrown companies to leadership roles. We don't do this either as well as we should. We are more concerned about what the CEOs are doing versus the people who founded companies in town. There's a great swath of younger people who want to start things, but when you start something in this town and you're not a CEO of an organization, you're looked at differently. But you may, an entrepreneur is different than a normal CEO, which obviously you guys are very well educated. I don't have to talk about this, but I will. CEOs run a company that is usually, running. It's got its feet under it, it's operating, you've got employees, etc. Entrepreneurs are starting something from nothing. And so why would we not place a higher value on people who are making something out of nothing as equally or as close to equally as somebody who's running an operation? Yes, you obviously have more people on your payroll, etc., and you maybe have a bigger budget, but if you've got something and you started in you created a healthcare company and you started in your garage and now it's on shelves across town, that's special. And other cities have found this to be true. When small businesses are the backbone of the United States, more people work for small businesses than work for any other category of company. And so if we start placing entrepreneurs and people who have started something in seats of influence, you get more people who want to start things. We should be the boutique capital of the world. We should have more companies started by people in this room and in others that are, $1 million businesses, $5 million businesses, have 4 or 5 or 6 employees. There should be more boutiques lined up across every street in this city and not so many big boxes and franchises. Maybe the franchises start here. Maybe the big companies start in Toledo. Next, create more spaces for inspired thought, which is why Rotary in so many cases is so important. Where do we have the kind of conversations that make people think differently about their lives and think differently about what their opportunities are? I'll talk to you about my experience in creating TEDx Toledo. I was a big TED watcher, as many of you might be. TED, for those who don't know, stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And these are 18-minute talks or less where people give a lecture on something that they're passionate about or have experience in. And I was thinking, back in 2011, 2010, if I could bring that sort of energy to Toledo, what would it do for our economy? Because at the time, and it's still true today, you shouldn't read the comments on the Blade. Don't read the comments. If you want to get discouraged about where Toledo's going, read the comment section. And so I was like, what can I do to raise the level of conversation in Toledo? And I was a TED watcher. I'm like, man, if I could bring that sort of energy to town, maybe we could organize more people who want to see this place be what it could be. And so I started TEDx Toledo, which is a license of TED. And so for the last 10 years, we've been organizing TED Talks every September, where we bring in people who are doing something remarkable, whether they're a scientist at the University of Toledo, or an entrepreneur, or a teacher, or a historian, and they tell a story. They give insight. They provide expertise in 18 minutes or less. And so what we wanted to do was organize people in a room who were interested in making the future Toledo better. And even with Toll House, Toll House is a private social club for the city-dwelling creative and entrepreneurial class. And that's a broad stroke because not all of our members are necessarily small business owners or painters. But what we wanted to do was organize people who were doing the work in whatever it is that they're doing to help Toledo be what it could be if we got out of our own way. So Toll House is not meant to be economically discriminatory. There are people who could write the whole year dues in a single check who didn't get approved. And there are people who couldn't write anything and got approved because we found a way to get them a part of the community, because the community is designed to be a place where we organize people who are doing the work. And just because you don't have the money doesn't mean you're not worthy to be in the space. And just because you have the money doesn't mean you're an asset to the community. And not that you wouldn't be an asset, but you maybe aren't doing the work anymore. Maybe you just throw the money around, and we can have conversations about people who write the check but won't get involved. Everybody in this room can talk about those kind of folks who write the check but won't get involved. It's something more valuable than the check you can write. So what we wanted to build was a community of people who were serious about making the community be what it could be if we got out of our own way. I didn't learn much about some of these things I'm about to mention. I didn't learn until I was not in Toledo. I didn't realize the value of what I had in Toledo until I left. And sometimes you have conversations with young people and you're trying to get them to stay in town. Sometimes they need to go. Sometimes it's okay to go. And then if God willing, if they come back with more insight. They come back with more experience and they realize what they have. There are people who move to Toledo who see the value more than people who have been here. I'm sure maybe you've heard those conversations. There are people who move here and like, I can get to wherever I need to go in 20 minutes and I can get on the phone with this person and I can make this inroads. You guys don't realize the opportunity you have. But the people here, not all of us, but you know, in some conversations, you wonder why, like you can leave, you know, like you can drive past 475. But I'm interested in talking to people who see the value in this town and want to realize that value. Ever since I was born and raised, I've heard that Toledo was wondering if we can do these next couple things right, we'll finally realize what we could have been all along. And for my entire life, I'm like, at what point will we realize this potential? Now feels different. It feels different now, which is why we invested at the levels we are, and I'll talk more about that. Default to hiring locally. There are CEOs in this room. There are, executives in this room who manage budgets. And we have conversations about outsourcing to companies who have a great name or great profile, nationally. But we have value and skill here at home. And so what if the people in this room and the places you have spheres of influence, you defaulted to hiring locally? And one of the conversations that always, it's been a thorn in my side because I have opportunities to sit in some of the places I sit, is, well, if we hire a small company, they don't have capacity. Well, how will they get capacity if you don't give them a shot? What we don't realize so often, and I had this experience with Creatio, when we would go after bigger deals, you really don't realize how much a $5,000 contract can mean to a small company. But because they can't do the $500,000 contract, that $5,000 contract, that $15,000 contract would mean so much. Not just because it's a little check, it puts you on their resume. When I started Creatio, Creatio stands for Creative Radio. Creatio started doing live in-store radio for brands. I told you I worked in radio and I was an entrepreneur at heart, and I was walking through a clothing store one day when I was on the radio, and they were playing FM radio over their sound system. And inevitably the commercials come on. This is a clothing store, and one of their competitors came on over the air inside their store. And I'm like, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but they hit me, they need their own radio station that just talks about them. So that's how Creatio started. And so we ended up, a mentor of mine owned several McDonald's, and I told him the idea, and I'm like, what if I created this live radio station that just talked about McDonald's? And his eyes got big and he's like, do it. And I did it. And so Creatio today has evolved, but what's important is we didn't make a bunch of money from doing this for one McDonald's or a couple McDonald's restaurants, but having McDonald's on my resume opened other doors. And so when we default to hiring locally, when we outsource as much work as we can, at whatever comfort level, is don't discount your ability to give a small contract to help raise up a company, because that small deal could mean the world. It could also not just put you on their resume and not just open an opportunity, it could also keep an entrepreneur who's this close to quitting from quitting. It could keep somebody who's ready to throw in the towel in the game, because it's really hard being an entrepreneur, and when you don't get a break and you live a brutal life because you chose to start something on your own. But when you create something and somebody gives you an opportunity, that means the world to people who are starting something. So I talked about Creatio, so I won't talk about that. These are some of the people on my team. Creatio doesn't just do live in-store music anymore. So we do more video production than anything. Video production, we're full service video production and communication strategy company, the only full service media company in the region. And so what we decided to do was lean into our niche. And so when I started the business, I didn't want to narrow our focus on a particular industry because I felt like that would eliminate opportunities for us. I was talking to a mentor. He said, I really think you should tailor your product and your offering and communication to a specific vertical. And so I took a shot. I'm like, I'll give it a try. And so before I tell you what it is, I learned that if we actually communicate to a specific demographic, a specific characteristic of company, organization that we want to serve, our business grew by 2 times the first year. We doubled in business in the first year. So what we decided to do was, because I have the only minority-run full-service marketing company in the region, is we focus on companies and organizations that are trying to reach and engage multicultural and diverse audiences, because I have the only one that's run by a multicultural and diverse audience. And so when organizations and companies are trying to reach people who look like me, here I am. Call us. And so that we leaned into what we were actually good at, and our business grew. We doubled that first year, and we've been continuing to grow since then. Toll House, I talked a little bit about Toll House. I won't spend much time there. I'm happy to have conversations about Toll House, but we have a coffee house which is open to the public Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 4. We do breakfast and lunch. The first jazz club inside the city in 10 years. Obviously, you've had some on the peripheral which aren't even here anymore, but inside Toledo, we have the first jazz club inside in 10 years. But again, our membership roll is full of people who are doing the work. And our oldest member is in her early 70s. Our youngest member is 22. And they're across industry, across demographics, Black, white, Hispanic, Indian, they're all over the place. But I always talk about the community in this way. If I'm sitting at the bar at J. Alexander's, and you're sitting at the bar, I probably don't need to know who you are. I'm minding my business, and you're minding your business, and we mind our business together. But if I'm sitting at the bar at Toll House, and you're sitting at the bar at Toll House, I probably should know who you are, because you're sitting in this room. Much like this room today, if you're sitting next to somebody you don't know, you probably should know who they are because you're in this room. And you don't know what value you can add to each other. So that's why we built Toll House, was to be the room where it happens. To be a play off the Hamilton. If I'm here, you're here, we should know each other, because we're doing the work to help Toledo be what it could be if we got out of our own way. Milk, we bought 2 more buildings, 1015 and 1017 North Summit, to build a market. We often talk about the need for more food options downtown, and this is not, an effort to solve a food desert crisis. Often when minorities and Black people talk about, I'm opening a market, they're trying to solve a food desert crisis. I'm not doing that. And I realize there's value in doing that, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm building a premium market. I want to compete with Whole Foods. I want to compete with Fresh Market. And so the market will be open. We bought this building. These are the buildings we bought. So you've probably seen this building. It's 2 doors over from Wonder Bread. We bought that the beginning or maybe the middle of 2022, and we bought the next door one middle of last year, a couple months later. So we busted a hole through the wall because they're connected. The buildings, it's like 4 buildings connected. We just busted a hole through the wall and to give more square footage to the market. And that'll be open this year. Disregard this because I learned to stop putting dates and publicizing dates about construction, because construction's construction. So disregard the spring. It'll be open this year. What I haven't talked about publicly yet, but I'll tell you guys in this room, is breaking news. 1017 is 2 floors. 1015 is 3 floors. There's more square footage on the 2nd and 3rd floors than there is on the 1st floor. So on the 2nd floor of 1017, we're building a comedy club, which will be open next year. I'm not in a rush to do that. And we're doing a speakeasy and a tea room. And so that'll be in the front of 1017. So it'll be, several different operations housed under effectively 2 roofs. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to dispel the idea that there's nothing to do in Toledo. We're trying to dispel the idea that you can't go downtown and have more entertainment than just a bar, which is fine. I'm, happy to go to a bar, but I want to laugh. I want to go listen to some comedians. I want to go to a dark speakeasy and get a really great cocktail. I want to go to a tea room and have a meeting, not over coffee, but over great tea. I want to do different things, which is, what is offered in so many other markets that we just haven't had the opportunity to do here. And so we're creating that. So Three things, to takeaways from this talk is, how do we make these things happen? I talked about a lot of things today. One is to have a clear vision of the future. What do we want? I'll give you my vision for today. What is your vision? And if you believe enough that you can actually make it happen, or even if you don't, communicate it, and you never know who will wrap up their arms around you and, say, well, let's go down this road together. So me communicating my vision makes somebody else in the room who's interested in that vision come alongside me. So talk about it. Have an appetite for risk. I talked about why I believe so many people didn't take those risks. But there's so many more people today who have an idea that if you just say, you know what, you can do this, and you introduce them to rooms where there are people who can create opportunities, and you're in a position to create opportunities, don't dispel because you can't give them the whole thing, that a little bit won't matter. 3, an unwavering determination. It's not easy being an entrepreneur. So many people in this room have started things and even taken bets on yourself. Maybe you didn't start a business, but you took a bet on yourself. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. I took a risk because it's very much easier to go get a job and contribute and to go start something. But that's what was important. That's what was important to me, is going to start something. So that's my talk. I'm out of time.
Wow, I'm kind of feeling like I'm not doing anything compared to what you just said. So thank you for all that you're doing for Toledo, Will. And if anyone has any questions, if you want to go up to the floor mic, we have time for a few.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lucas. So I'm asking this question really just because you touched on it, and I heard you do it in another talk. So I'm going to ask the question just so that everybody else can hear the answer, because I love it. It, to me, is really important, the power of exposure. And you talked about to Leadership Ohio, why you decided to do a premium grocery store in that particular community. Could you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So obviously our real estate is in Toledo's oldest neighborhood, Vistula. And some people often ask me, well, what do I think about, the areas behind Vistula? And I'm not into residential real estate. And so I can't answer any questions about residential real estate. But what I can say is that when I grew up, there wasn't so many people who looked like me, and at least that I was aware of, that owned businesses, were creating opportunities. When I started to be an entrepreneur, not until I moved to Atlanta did I see Black people who looked like me and were realizing success, and they weren't in the music business, they weren't in sports, and they weren't selling drugs. When I was growing up here, I didn't see Black wealth. I didn't see, and we're very visual people, admittedly, so I didn't see people driving big cars, nice houses, manicured lawns until I moved to Atlanta. And so what I can say about those groups of people, not even just in that neighborhood, but young Black people who want to see something different and believe that something is possible, may not have representation, and why I believe I was blessed to be able to create businesses here and not somewhere else, is because I didn't have a Will Lucas to look up to when I was growing up. So hopefully my successes can, not even the folks in that neighborhood, but even beyond that neighborhood, show a representation of what's possible when you have ideas and you're from communities of people who don't historically have the platform to do those sorts of things. That's part of it, yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lucas. Dr. Marvin Whitfield, CEO of the Blue Force Mobile Training Team, and also Big Brother Big Sister Northwestern Ohio. I do want to piggyback. You're right, a lot of people find it easy to cut a check. And as a Rotarian, I was in that space to work with the Rotary, and I was investing 25% on every dollar making to youth-related programs as a philanthropist. And it was through the Rotary that I met Big Brother Big Sisters, where I'm now the CEO, working pro bono to give back. And I tell people I've served in the military and in law enforcement, I've never worked so hard in my life trying to help the community. So my question to you is, how do we take and put young men and women into the space of people like you to inspire them? And through your businesses and through your programs, do you have any youth-related programs or talks where we can put the youth we work with within the community in the same space as you?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I'm not special. And so there's nothing that I did that more people in this room and more people who look like me can't do. I took a gamble on myself. I took a risk. And I stepped out on faith. And ultimately, I believe faith never fails. It will work out eventually. It was really hard. And so I'll start by saying, you know, I get asked, as many of you guys do, to mentor, to have, you know, that one-on-one contact. And I do it where I can. What I'm interested in is scale. I tried to scale my mentorship, so because I get asked the same question a lot, and so by different people. So I'm like, what if I can answer that one question one time and then create content that helps it scale, and you can just share the link. So I get asked how to podcast a lot, and so instead of keep answering that question every time somebody asks, I created a video, and here's a link: how to podcast, how to great guests for your podcast, which equipment should you buy. So I'm very interested in scale. That's my tech side of me. But to the part of showing, because you mentioned not just me, but people like me, is we need more people who are taking risks. And so we don't do ourselves a good service if there's one representation or two represent. And I'm not special in that way, but more of us need to take a risk. When we talk about you can do anything, and you tell a child that, why should they believe you if they don't see you trying? Why would they believe you? When you come home and you complain about your day, and you complain about who you work with, and you complain about your lifestyle and the money you make, and then you tell a child you can be anything you want to be, why would I believe you? But if I see you, even if it's not working as fast, but I see you loving what you're doing, you're building something that you're passionate about, and you're taking risks on yourself, that's the greatest privilege I have. Is I have 3 small children who get to come to a place that Daddy built. They saw it when there were no walls in the place, and now they get to work there. My daughter's 12 years old. She gets to work in the jazz club. My son wants to be a musician because he gets to see some of the best musicians in town. My baby girl just wants to get a smoothie. So I mean, she could do that too. But they get to see Daddy build something, and there should be more of us who have that. But it won't happen if we don't take that risk and gamble on ourselves. So my admonishment is to just create more. And so we'll talk more about that.
I listened to you talk, Will, and I remember hearing you talk, and I think it was over at Manhattan's, and I think Mike Ashford had brought you in to talk to some young black people to try to encourage them to want to get involved and become entrepreneurs. And I remember you talking about your call name on the radio being King Cobra. I don't know if you put that to bed. King Kaiser, I'm sorry. But it was like, I don't know if you put that name to bed or what you did with it, but I never hear you mention it anymore. And I just thought I'd bring that up. But I also listened to you talk about when you started some of the businesses that you started, you got involved and collaborated with other people. But one of the things that I found really worked, and I don't know if you've ever done this when you've started businesses, but to try to look for and develop other people that can help you take an idea, hone the idea, develop the idea, and actually put it into action, and not try to do it all by yourself. Because I found the more times I got people involved that I believed in and believed in me, the easier it was to get those businesses started. Maybe you'd want to talk a little on that.
Yeah, real quick, because I know I don't want to take up all time, but real quick, I mean, there's so many people who have been part of my story, mentors and the like. Even Candace Harrison is somebody that I call because, her skill set is so valuable, and she's been a blessing to me in my business and being able to communicate effectively. So there are people who have small businesses, people who are just very skilled and are starting businesses, and that, when you lean into people who are good at certain things, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to marry them in business. You don't need to necessarily go into business, but use what they're good at. And that helps them get the confidence to maybe I can do this thing for real. You never know what people are battling with internally, with what their skills might be, and they don't see an outlet to leverage those skills. And so what I would say is really find people who are good at what they do. Try to find a place that, it may be beneficial to you in your business. But I've had great mentors through my whole life. Mentors in every aspect of my life, whether it be spiritual, business, social, from a father. I've had great mentors everywhere in my life. Yeah. Ask questions, you sir.
Hey, Will, Kelly Train from Girl Scouts of Western Ohio. At Girl Scouts, we're all about building girls that have that strong sense of self, being able to engage in community problem solving, and have those healthy relationships and positive values. We're really working to expand our access so that more girls can have access to these opportunities. When I look at that in that spirit and that going forward with accessibility, how can we work to help make sure that all girls, all young people are having access to learning about being an entrepreneur and helping to also grow in your vision for Toledo and find their vision?
Yes, I'm going to take this. I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to answer it in a different way than I've talked about this already. So as I mentioned, I'm on the board at University of Toledo. And one of the things I'm super adamant about, and I've been preaching this since I've been on the board, is I don't believe in performative exercises for students. And here's what I mean by that. I don't believe in business plan competitions. I don't believe in let's go build a fake company to pass a grade, when there are enough companies out there who could use the skills that you're learning every day. And if you apply those skills to a case study, let's go to Gary's business and work on a project he's having a challenge with. I believe that's a more effective use of their time than putting them in a room and saying, all right, girls, all right, guys, let's create a business. That's fine, but if you put them on a real world task and you get to see what the outcomes are for Gary's business or for Candace's business or for a challenge TPS is having, that's more valuable than just creating something to get a passing grade. So I would expose them to as many real world opportunities to create change as possible and not just things inside of a classroom.
Thank you. And Will, as a thank you from our club, I'd like to offer this book, Historical Tales of Toledo, that was written by one of our past presidents, Clint Mock. Yeah. And we'll be making a donation to the Polio Plus Fund in your name. So thank you for your time. Lastly, I'd like to call up new member Raina Dawson, and she's going to give us her Rotary Why.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to start off by saying that I was not given a time limit, so good luck, everyone. Hi, I've been a member of Rotary for such a short amount of time, and I'm blessed, and I'm grateful, and I'm thankful. Part of what makes me is that I'm a little awkward, and I'm a little nerdy. So as part of becoming a new member, we got emails asking us to participate in a new member, a mandatory new member mixer. And so I signed up for the new member mixer. Turns out I did not sign up for a new member mixer. I signed up for RLI Leadership Training and Academy. So I showed up in Findlay, Ohio, Fremont, Ohio, to the RLI 6-7 hour presentation about leadership and membership, and it was super impactful. And it's a great way. Shut up, Will. It's a great way to be. It's a great way to be, you know, immersed into Rotary. And part of what she was saying, the speaker was very powerful and impactful. And at one point, she asked us to close our eyes and picture what a Rotarian looks like. And then she said, it looks like you, me, sitting here. And I opened my eyes immediately and I said, a Rotarian does not look like me. Another thing that occurred while I was there is I can't remember what was asked, but how do we become a part of Rotary? And a big part of Rotary is asking our neighbor to join the Rotary Club. And I had to raise my hand because I have been in the service world in Toledo for over a decade, and not at one time was I invited to be a Rotarian. Prior to law school, I was training a mediator who was enrolled in law school, and she invited me to the Zonta Club. And she's like, you have to come, it's a great service organization for women, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you know what, you're really excited. I'm trying to show you how to solve conflict and resolve conflict in juvenile court. And she's like, you absolutely must come to Zonta. So I showed up and I loved it, right? And I've been a Zontian for many years, but one thing that happened when I showed up the first day was I learned that Zonta existed because Rotarians did not allow women to join Rotary Club. And I thought that was, and it has existed for over 100 years. And then I looked it up online and I saw in 1987, there was a court case that said, okay, you gotta let women join. And So as we know, historically, as soon as laws change, everyone immediately changes their mind, right? So I learned that it was such a powerful, impactful thing, and so since I've been a part of Zonta for so long, and since I've been in so many service organizations, bar events, and bar organizations, and not one person had invited me ever, not at one time to Rotary. Like literally, I think I said at the thing, I said men would literally stand up at bar social meeting and go, well, gotta go to Rotary. They'd never say, wow, great, you're working really hard in the community. You're very scholarly. I think I should invite you to Rotary Club. That has never happened at one time. So I stood up and I said, hey, I was working, living my life, and one day a colleague of mine asked me for my information, my email and my phone number, and I was like, whatever, why? He said, I'm referring you for 20 under 40. And I didn't know what 20 under 40 is, and I was like, whatever, anyway, back to work. So I showed up, I got nominated I filled out the application, and I kind of filled it out. I'm saying there wasn't enough space to put all of the service activities and accomplishments on the application, so I kind of just said, I'm gonna fit it in and I'm gonna turn it in and good luck. The night before 20 under 40, fast forward a couple months, we get an email application that said, you're one of 167 applicants for 20 under 40. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to support others. I'm gonna toss on anything tomorrow. I'm gonna show up after a couple of community meetings and a day working at Able all day, and I'm gonna just show up. So I showed up to 20 under 40 the following evening. I did not invite any friends. I didn't invite my parents. And I showed up and I met a banker, and she bought me 2 cocktails. I chugged them down because you can't drink inside a Valentine Theater. And I sat next to some strangers, right? And I sat next to some strangers. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Who cares? I'm like texting memes to my family chat. And so I did not pay attention to any of the introduction, right? And so I hear the first person that won a 20 under 40. And they're like, she's here, she beat cancer twice. And I'm like, I do not stand a chance, okay? And I'm like applauding and hoping to see people I know. And I quickly learned that I was the next person to be called up. They said in the instructions, which I did not listen to, they're supposed to stay seated until the end, you're not supposed to do whatever. And I jumped up like, oh my gosh. And so one of the prizes was a membership to Rotary Club of Toledo. And before I could even think, I turned in my application so fast, because I'm gonna tell you, Rotary for me was just something that I saw on like a stamp on projects. I saw Rotary signs, I saw Rotary meets at XYZ. I thought I would never, ever, ever be a Rotarian. So I'm so grateful for the initiative. When we talk about membership drives, had this woman who I never thought I'd see a woman Rotarian president ever be here, I would not be here, I would not be a Rotarian. So I'm excited to learn and grow with all of you. And I'm gonna take the 3rd RLI class because I've already taken a 2nd one. Thank you so very much. That is my Rotary why. I look forward to making changes in the world with all of you. And your son is correct about having video games at Toll House. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Raina. We're more excited to have you here with us, I think. When she told her story at RLI, Jackie and I were flabbergasted, and I definitely knew we had to get her up here so she could share with all of you. With that said, we have 3 meetings today. We'll be in this room, so when you get together, just kind of spread yourselves out. We have membership, environmental, and public image. If you have not joined a committee or have not attended one of these meetings, today might just be the day, because it's going to be so easy, you won't have to leave. And public image is meeting for the first time, so if you have any desire to share your skills as a communicator, social media person, or just someone who wants to share the mission of Rotary, that might be your fit. So with that said, thank you all for coming. Thank you for having us here today. Thank you, Will, and thank you to all our guests that are here today. The meeting is adjourned.